Bona tarda a tothom. Benvinguts aquí al BBVA. Soc Antoni Vallabriga, director global de negoci responsable del banc, i en nom del banc i en nom de la Fundació Catalunya Europa donar-los a tots la benvinguda en aquesta nova jornada, nova sessió dins el marc del programa Recity, en el qual estem repensant, reimaginant el rol de les ciutats i de les àrees metropolitanes per abordar el canvi climàtic. I com tots sabeu, doncs hem anat tenint el luxe de poder conèixer experiències de visions multidisciplinars sobre aquest gran repte que ens ocupa a la societat, a les administracions, a la societat civil. I avui doncs tenim la gran sort de tenir nosaltres a Stephen Nolan. Després presentarem que parlarà del món de les finances, com realment també des del món de les finances es pot i s'ha d'abordar el repte del canvi climàtic. També està a mi a la taula Humberto Llaverador, membre del comitè d'experts del programa Recity en canvi climàtic. I bé, jo abans de passar la paraula amb l'Humberto perquè faci la presentació a l'Stephen, a qui agraeixo que ens hagi acompanyi, que hagi vingut des de Dublin. Thank you, Stephen. Nice to have you here. Una breu introducció del tema en qüestió, no? Del tema de les finances sostenibles, i més de tenir les circumstàncies de que parlem des d'una entitat financera, no? I de fet explica el per què des d'un banc com el BBVA doncs, venim recolzant aquest projecte multidisciplinar on busquem la complicitat de la societat, dels líders empresarials, de l'acadèmia i de l'administració per abordar aquest repte, no? Després suposo que l'Stephen també ho aprofundirà, però jo m'agradaria aprofitar aquests minuts breus per reflexionar sobre el que està passant també en el món financer, no? Jo diria que en el món financer avui està vivint un autèntic punt d'inflexió en aquest món de les finances sostenibles. Els darrers 2-3 anys han passat moltes coses d'una manera accelerada que posen en evidència que la indústria financera i molt particularment els bancs hem de fer un esforç titànic per realment fer el canvi que necessita la nostra societat, no? De canalitzar el capital i les finances amb una nova manera de fer banca, una nova manera de finançar, i és un canvi, un punt d'inflexió que ve realment motivat per 5 grans forces, no? La primera, la força de lo que és l'agenda global, una agenda marcada per l'Acord de París del 2015 i pels objectius de desenvolupament sostenible del 2015, on s'ha posat aquests temes de canvi climàtic i sostenible al màxim nivell. Una segona gran força, que és el mercat. El mercat avui a nivell financer comença a ser una realitat. Cada vegada hi ha més empreses, institucions que busquen solucions de finançament diferents per abordar les seves estratègies i els seus plans d'inversió. Jo diria que sobretot al món corporatiu encara ens falta molt avançar en el món del client minorista, de les petites empreses, però el món de les grans empreses comença a ser ja un món que està mobilitzant, i aquí tindrem temps de parlar després de tota la dinàmica dels bons verds, dels préstecs verds, que acaben sent una dinàmica creixent, no? De solucions cada vegada més adaptades a el que necessita aquesta transició, no? La tercera gran força que està canviant, i per això diem que parlem d'un punt d'inflexió, és la força del món inversor. Els inversors, sobretot els inversors institucionals, que tenen un horitzó d'inversió a llarg termini, acaben demanant cada vegada més que les empreses amb les que s'inverteix se segueixin estratègies i polítiques i pràctiques responsables. El risc climàtic és un risc que a curt termini doncs, no és material, però que sigui a mig llarg termini sí que ho és, i per tant els inversors que tenen aquest horitzó a llarg termini cada vegada més demanen que les empreses i també les entitats financeres i els bancs treballem amb aquesta mirada més a llarg termini. Només falta veure la carta de Rally Feng, el CEO de BlackRock, el gestor d'actius més important del món, que cada vegada els darrers anys doncs, ha estat més focalitzada en aquesta idea d'empreses, entitats orientades a un propòsit, a llarg termini, i a treballar per aquest desenvolupament sostenible, no? La quarta força que està configurant també pel sector financer és la pressió creixent del món regulador i el supervisor. Hi ha hagut una sèrie d'iniciatives on realment jo diria que el discurs que va marcar un abans i un després també va ser, en aquest cas, el discurs de Mark Carney el governador de Banc d'Inglaterra el 2015, parlant del risc climàtic com a risc sistèmic. El Mark Carney, a part de ser el governador d'Anglaterra, és el president del Consell d'Estabilitat Financera, que es va crear amb la crisi, i va fer un discurs realment trencador, no? D'abordar que el tema climàtic era una oportunitat, però també significava un risc no només pels temes físics, de desastres naturals i de calentament del planeta, sinó també un risc de transició, d'indústries, sectors que poden veure's molt afectades per canvis regulatoris, per canvis de tecnologia, i que per tant els bancs i les asseguradores teníem que integrar aquests temes als nostres models i que això tenia que passar. Això va ser un discurs el 2015, es van crear unes recomanacions sobre canvi climàtic i el sector financer liderades per Michael Bloomberg, i els supervisors han vingut després. S'ha creat una xarxa de bancs centrals des de fa 15 mesos, on hi ha 30 entitats, entre elles el Banc Central Europeu, el Banc d'Espanya i molts altres bancs centrals, per demanar que la banca progressivament integri aquest tema als seus models. Sense anar més lluny, fa 10 dies el Banc Central Europeu ha emès un primer pilot amb 10 entitats financeres, 10 bancs aquí a Europa, per fer un assessment, una valoració del risc climàtic a nivell d'entitat financera. Per tant, una quarta pressió creixent per part de la supervisió, del regulador, que fa que això acabi sent un tema més material per a les entitats financeres i pels bancs. I per últim, la tecnologia. La tecnologia el que està fent és democratitzar l'accés a les oportunitats com mai, però és cert que també suposa un repte majúscul i farà possible que aquesta transició que s'ha de fer de canalització de fons cap a nous projectes i descanalitzar l'economia es pugui fer d'una manera diferent a través de la tecnologia, que ens ha de permetre fer un salt també qualitatiu. Per tant, aquestes 5 forces, i per acabar, configuren un bon moment per a la indústria financera. Jo diria que els bancs estem fent un treball d'acceleració per adaptar-nos a aquesta nova realitat. Les noves societats, les noves generacions ens demanen un rol diferent, i jo crec que pels bancs és un moment per reinventar-se i repensar la manera com fem banca. Aquí és on encaixa una miqueta la intervenció d'avui, perquè aquesta aspiració de repensar la banca, que ens exigirà anar molt més enllà del que habitualment hem estat fent, doncs ho veiem no només com un repte, sinó també evidentment com una oportunitat. En aquest context és on s'emmarca també l'estratègia que tenim al banc, una estratègia ambiciosa de mobilitzar 100.000 milions d'euros els propers 8 anys. L'any passat vam mobilitzar pràcticament 12.000 milions d'euros en finances sostenibles. Ens queda molt per fer, però bé, una de les peces clau d'aquesta estratègia és fomentar aquesta involucració amb tots els actors a diferents nivells, a nivell Nacions Unides, a nivell Europa i, per què no, evidentment, a nivell territori, i aquí és on s'emmarca la iniciativa de Recity, buscar generar aquesta complicitat amb altres actors per poder fer aquest moviment a l'escala que la societat necessita. Jo estic molt content que l'Stephen, que dirigeix una xarxa de centres financers, que ara us explicarà, ens acompanyi avui, partint d'una visió internacional del que està passant en el món, més enllà del que des del punt de vista més proper tenim aquí a Catalunya i aquí al nostre país. Res més. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. I give the floor to Humberto, sisplau.
Bona nit a tothom, benvinguts. És un plaer introduir l'Stephen Nolan aquesta nit. Jo faré, com sempre faré la introducció, la faré en anglès. I think to think about Stephen Nolan, the first thing we have to keep in mind is that the last decade has experienced an incredible growth in the importance of environmental, social and good governance criteria. All this in investment decision, what maybe we could call sustainable finance if we want to put it in one word. Dublin has played a significant role in this progress, and I think in good part thanks to the speaker today, to Stephen Nolan. So Stephen Nolan started in IT, and what he told me kind of by coincidence in the education in 2003, where he was the CEO of the Global E-School and Communities Initiative, a UN founded organization to advise ministers of education in developing world to make good strategic decisions in incorporating IT in their curricula. But it's prior to 2010 when he returns to financing and becomes the CEO and co-founder of the Green International Financial Services Centre that makes Ireland the leader in green financing. So I'm not going to list all the positions and achievements of Stephen because I'm not giving the talk today, but let me just highlight a couple of them. So he has also worked as the advisor for the Paladin Capital Group Europe, and an initiative that is quite interesting, that or at least I find quite interesting, that it's the 40 under 40 sustainable business leaderships, which are 40 company executives under 40 leading Ireland's corporate sustainability behavior. His activity has nothing but increased in the last years. Since 2007, has been a member of the steering committee of the Sustainable and Responsible Investment Forum in Ireland, and in 2019 has been appointed as the managing director of the UN Environmental Financial Center of Sustainability Network. So with these credentials, I think we can expect a very exciting and educating talk tonight. And without further ado, thanks, Stephen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I feel like I need to bring you back to Ireland with me. It'd be great to say that to an Irish audience. No, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here in Barcelona today and tomorrow. I'm here today to work with the guys on the event, and also tomorrow to work with the Barcelona Financial Services Centre to launch Barcelona Sustainable Finance Initiative. So I'm really excited to be here for 2 days. I want to thank Tony and obviously BBVA for hosting us here today. There's a reason why Spain is a leader in sustainable finance, and it's down to individuals like Tony and the financial institutions that they work for in green bonds and the whole area of responsible investment. I want to thank the foundation for having me here as well. Gina was explaining to me the good work that you do. It's quite amazing, actually, quite inspiring. So thank you very much for organising today. And then obviously none of this would happen without Gina from ReCity and her colleagues. So again, thank you, Gina. She gave me a bit of a start a few weeks ago when I rang her. I said, "What do you need me to do, Gina?" And she goes, "Well, a TED Talk." And I'm like, "A TED Talk?" I said, "Have you seen a TED Talk?" And so she got me quite nervous. And the sweat on my forehead, which is always quite shiny over the phone, I was like, "Are you sure it's a TED Talk?" But I'm glad that it's not. And then I asked the guys today, "What do you need me to do?" And they said, "Just be entertaining." So, I'm not Tony, I'm not you guys, and so I'm not going to be entertaining. I'm going to focus on the facts. But I am genuinely thrilled to be here with you. I think Ireland and Spain share a lot of characteristics, and we travel across each other's path quite a lot. So as I said, Tony, thank you for hosting us. Thank you to the Foundation for supporting the good work of ReCity, and Gina, thank you for facilitating and bringing us all together. So my presentation has basically been, Tony's given away all the secrets. So I'm going to dash through it, and I'm open for questions. But who am I today? I'm an ex-Irish government advisor on technology. I was Kofi Annan's advisor on technology and education. I then worked for a number of high net worth individuals in strategy as their chiefs of staff. And then a number of years ago, at the height of the Irish crisis, when Ireland was really going down the tubes, and the IMF were in going, "You have to do this, you have to do that," we were looking at our International Financial Services Centre and saying, what can we actually do with Ireland's International Centre? Ireland, believe it or not, is the largest area for the leasing of aviation aircraft. 60% of aircraft leasing is done through Ireland. And that actually came about through the founder of Ryanair. He started a business, it was about leasing planes. It failed. And the guys used to work from went and set up their own businesses and created a cluster effect. And that's part of the reason why I'm talking about today. And then he went off and set up Ryanair, so he didn't do bad in the end himself. But Ireland also has 35,000 bonds listed on the stock exchange, and there's over 4 trillion euros in funds administered and serviced out of Ireland. So there's over 40,000 people in our small country work in the international financial services sector. And then obviously as a domestic economy, we are now the fastest growing economy in Europe. It looks like that may be knocked off kilter by Brexit. We'll see what happens there, but I won't mention the B word again tonight. As the closest neighbour, we focus in on a lot of it, and I suppose if it does happen, Ireland will lose a lot of GDP points, which would be a bit of obviously a problem. But what I am here today to talk about is more about the European network around ESG or sustainable finance, and I'm thrilled to be able to do that as an Irish person. Ireland and Irish people are very outward looking. We are a very open economy, I think second in the world after Singapore, so we travel well, and you'll always find a paddy somewhere. If not a paddy, you'll always find a paddy's pub somewhere in the world, and I saw a few in Barcelona when I walked around today. So again, thank you for having me here. I'm going to talk about the UN Environment Convened Network of Financial Centres for Sustainability. But before I jump into it, and again, as Tony said, the 5 drivers, but what is sustainable finance? That's a key one. And you know, sustainable finance is any form of financial service that integrates environmental, social and governance criteria into the business or investment decisions for the lasting benefit of both clients and society at large. And that's the key difference. So ESG, environment, social and governance, what was 20, 25, even 15 years ago, Tony? 10 years ago? Very much a niche space, is now becoming more and more mainstream. And from my perspective, we hear terms such as green finance, climate finance, sustainable finance. I'm in this space and I get confused with all the different terms. I think over the next number of years, it will just be finance. It will be about commerce, because as Tony pointed out, this is through the perspective of long-termism. And that's what we're looking at. And eventually, you won't see firms reporting on a quarterly basis, it'll be on the medium to long term. So as I said, for the lasting benefit of both clients and society at large, then what is a sustainable financial centre? And that is a centre that contributes to sustainable development and value creation in economic, environmental and social terms. So what we're seeing tomorrow evening in the stock exchange here in Barcelona is that Barcelona is launching its own sustainable finance initiative. So Tony and his colleagues and Santander and other institutions, including the stock exchange, are coming together to mobilize the Barcelona community and the Barcelona community cluster, an ecosystem of financial service players, to say what is Barcelona going to do in this space. And Barcelona is obviously an international financial services centre as well, and your footprint is global, but also in the region. Because here in this area, you have to decarbonize your economy over the coming decades. Where is that money going to come from? And why shouldn't it be Spanish capital supported by government to invest in those technologies? And therefore, why then can't it be Spanish technology that is then exported around the world to decarbonize the rest of the world? So that's what sustainable finance is. That's what a sustainable finance centre is. And what we have here today now is we've got, under the UN, 22 financial centres have come together to create this network, and Barcelona is one of those, I'm very pleased to say. So again, I think as Tony said, just if you don't mind me just recapping this, otherwise I'll lose my way. A global shift is underway. An increased number of leading financial centres taking strategic action on sustainable finance. So you would have seen first Paris and then London. London as a global financial centre is no surprise. Paris obviously out of COP21, the Paris Agreement. And what was different that I saw in the Paris discussions versus my previous work in the UN, in the previous years when I was about technology and development, it was the heads of corporate social responsibility that came to the meetings. And they had a budget, and it was more around CSR. Now what you actually have coming to these meetings are the equivalents of Tony's, that are in business development. And that's a different type of animal within an institution. It's strategic, it's looking at the institution from a risk and a reward perspective going forward. In 2017, the UN established the FC4S network at the request of the G7, which is great. And then in this year, the network is driving collaborative projects, engaging new members and advising on strategies. So in the last year alone, we've jumped from 11 members to 22, and I hope to increase that growth over the next months. We've just launched a new report a number of weeks ago with the Commission in Brussels, and effectively what we did there, we actually analysed all the centres to see what they're doing, and we were the first body to do that. And we were able to do that because of the UN. So don't forget, all these centres are also competing. And I think coming together under a UN umbrella allows everybody to say, how can we collaborate rather than compete? And therefore information is willing to be shared. In Europe, we facilitate policy engagement with the European Commission and strategic projects between European centres. And I think one of the things that Tony said, and he chairs the European Banking Federation working group on sustainable finance, there's so much happening in Brussels on this topic right now. And as Tony mentioned, one of the drivers as regulators, it's not DG climate or DG Environment. It's DG FISMA, which is the Financial Services Regulator. So that means that the entire capital markets ecosystem is watching this and saying, well, what are you going to actually suggest? So there's a whole thing about taxonomy, green bonds, so on and so forth. So the real kicker, as Tony mentioned, is the regulatory pressure is a big one as well, and the fact that the Commission is saying, we want to be a leader in this space. And you know, it wasn't that long ago, if you remember, when we used to have Nokia's and Ericsson phones at a global level. Europe was the leader, now we're using an Apple phone. Again, what Europe is looking at is, why can't we be leader in sustainable finance within Europe, but also globally? And why can't it be European capital, knowledge, tech in the future that kind of decarbonizes the world? So, as I said, we aim to really accelerate growth in sustainable finance markets in 2019. We have a special focus on Africa, which I'll come to in a moment. So the context, again, the role of financial centres for sustainable development. 70 trillion of assets under management of companies which are signatories to the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. So over 2,000 signatories. And what that is a company, as Tony said, it's from the investment world. That if I'm looking to invest in you and you want to, if I'm looking for you to manage my money, I want to know that you signed up to these principles around that environmental, social and governance. And right now, if you haven't signed up, there's a big question mark around you. And that's why over 2,000 have signed up. $140 billion total insured losses from natural disasters in 2017. And I think what we're now seeing, what were 1,000 year events are now becoming every few years are happening at scale and costing a lot of money. And actually what's interesting about that 140 billion was another 140 or so billion was uninsured of losses. So in total it was nearly 300 billion of losses in that year alone. 14 times increase in annual issuance of labelled green bonds from 11 to 155 billion. And here in Barcelona, there's a lot of activity going on in green bonds as well. And this is a real kicker that myself and Tony were talking to a journalist about earlier on today. When you know something's of interest, policymakers are looking at it. You know, since 2013, over 270 policies in the area of sustainable finance from different governments in the world have issued, from China to India to Europe. And so there's a lot happening in this space. That's given a policy anchor to entrepreneurs, which is then allowing them to go to capital markets seeking capital. So why focus on financial centres? There's an estimated 100 plus major financial centres around the world, a key community to accelerate finance for sustainable development and climate action. So again, go all the way back to the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. It is estimated by the G20 that $90 trillion is required to be mobilised in support of climate action. That's $90 trillion. If you make it down to a very small country like Ireland, Ireland between now and 2030 needs to mobilise 50 billion euro. So, you know, I don't know what Spain is, I don't know what this region is, but it's in the billions, if not the hundreds of billions here in Spain. Given that Ireland, like a small country, is 50 billion. So this is about capital. It's not about corporate social responsibility. It's not about philanthropy. It's about capital being mobilised to get a decent return, and that will be paid back and has a positive effect. So why financial centres? It's harnessing the cluster effect. So the synergies from concentration of activities, say in Barcelona, banking, capital markets, the stock exchange, insurance, professional services, public finance and regulation. It's driving competitiveness, as Tony said, one of the drivers. Sustainability has become a key factor when somebody's looking at you as a centre and saying, are you taking this seriously in terms of upside opportunities and downside risk? One of the reasons for that, if you step back for a moment and you look at a police or a teacher, or a policeman or a teacher. So a policeman will go out on the beat for 30 years. And he or she will retire tomorrow. They'll have been putting into their pension fund for the last 30 years. They expect, as long as they live, to actually get a pension check each month. The cop that then appears to take over from him or her will work for another 30 years. So institutional investors are looking at this as a 60-year cycle, and so they want to know where they invest their money is going to be managed in a way which is sustainable. Delivering policy goals, I mentioned the Commission earlier on, I won't go over that. And then this is the real interesting one, and again, it's sometimes what we forget. What are the financial sector? Well, what is the capital market for? It's to service the real economy. It's to create jobs, support jobs, and it's that word commerce. It's to support commerce. And I suppose that's one of the key areas that we're focused on. It offers a way for financial centres to serve the real economy in transition, closing the gap between Wall Street and Main Street. The different dimensions of a sustainable finance centre, so banking, debt capital, insurance, investment, nothing that you wouldn't be aware of there, but all these different areas that you may touch upon either as a retail, in a bank such as this, or in a stock exchange, are all now trying to figure out how do they embrace sustainable finance, as Tony said, from a risk or an opportunity perspective. That people are struggling. As I said, different languages, different definitions, but as Tony said earlier on, if you're not in this space, you're going to be left behind. And as an institution, you will fail eventually, because this is now what is being demanded. And those 5 drivers, the global agenda, the market, the investment, pressure from regulators, and then tech, this is impacting all this agenda here and this ecosystem in particular as it relates to climate action. Growing momentum. In the last 3 years, as I said, there's been over 270 new policies. Imagine what the next 3 years are going to look like. This is getting faster and faster and faster. More deals are being found. Regulators coming into the marketplace and saying, we don't actually have that long anymore. And I'm not saying this from somebody is from a climate perspective. I'm looking at this from a, with a young family, myself, we're looking at the 2030 now and saying, we actually only have really 12 years to figure this out. And so we need to unlock 90 trillion over the next decade. How can you do that in a way which is sane, which is reasonable, which is not going to lead to massive losses? So what you're seeing, as Tony said earlier on, a lot is happening at the policy level to create an anchor for the capital markets and the entrepreneurs to play in and to be successful. So as Tony said earlier on, 2015 you had COP, you had the UN SDGs, G20 in China 2016, European Union kicking off 2017, Mayor Bloomberg coming in 2017 with Governor Carney, G7 Italy, and then obviously the launch of our network. So this thing is really like a snowball gaining a lot of traction. G7 have endorsed what we do, which is fantastic. It's a beautiful table there with loads of grass on it. But as they said, sustainable finance is fundamental to achieve sustainability and climate goals. We recognise the commitments made by financial sectors and centres and the potential. So effectively what the ministers for the environment here were saying is governments do not have enough money to meet that 90 trillion. They need to crowd in private capital. Private capital, such as Tony's institution, will only get involved if there are sound and solid policy environments in place to allow them to invest along industry. If not, that's CSR, that's philanthropy, or that will see a financial system in meltdown. And as Tony mentioned, Governor Carney earlier on, this is a big risk to the financial services sector, climate. And he said, if we do not deal with this as regulators, what happened in 2008 and 2009 in Spain and Ireland, other jurisdictions, will just be a small little pebble in the ocean in comparison to what could potentially happen. So this is the governor of the Bank of England saying that. About the FC4S network, and I'll push through this quickly, it's a partnership between leading financial centres of the UN with a secretariat headquartered in Geneva. Its objective, enable financial centres to exchange experience, drive convergence, and take action and share priorities to accelerate expansion of green and sustainable finance. In effect, to come together around a table and say, outside this room we compete, inside this room we need to mobilise this, we need to mobilise our ecosystems behind us. What can you do, what can I do? London, Frankfurt, Dublin, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Shanghai, wherever it may be. How can we work together to mobilise our centres and support this agenda, and in doing so do it in the right way? There's 22 members, which I'll come to in a moment. Coverage is across Europe, Asia, Africa and the Americans, and what we have, and we're very fortunate that we're funded by governments in the main and a foundation and a limited amount of private sector capital. Here's the membership. There's Barcelona, third from the top, and as I said, fantastic tomorrow to be formally launching the Barcelona Sustainable Finance Initiative. From a personal perspective, Ankel, who is the MD of the Barcelona Centre here, only reached out to us last September. I was in Barcelona a month later, speaking to 100 people in the stock exchange. He came to Dublin for a UN event a month later. He was then at another event with us in January, I believe, and then we're back here in April. So in the space of 8 months, where Barcelona was, what are we doing? The strategic scope and the strategic vision that's gone into saying, we now know what we want to do, which is going to be launched tomorrow, which is quite exciting. And it kind of gives a sense of what the centre is trying to do. Casablanca, that's where our first meeting was. It sounds very romantic. It wasn't. My flights were both delayed. I got in really, really late, and I saw the inside of a hotel room in a conference centre, and I didn't see a piano. But it was a fantastic space to be at, with 11 or 12 different centres all saying, hey, how can we work together, which really kicked it off in September 2017. Obviously Dublin's there, but then you got locations like Hong Kong, London, Liechtenstein, Nairobi's one of our latest members to come on board. Again, a lot of money required in Africa, but deemed by capital markets to be quite risky, Tony, if that will be the perception. And so one thing that FC4S is going to work with in the capital market sector in Africa is to upskill at a technical level and capacity. Paris, New York, Mayor Bloomberg helped create the US Alliance for Sustainable Finance. We're thrilled with that. And he came on board before Christmas. Seoul, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Toronto's there as well. Interesting about China. You've got Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, hopefully a few more cities in China. The scale of China. I was in Shanghai recently and it just blew me away, the scale and how bright everything was in the evening time. But it was amazing. We have to do this. And it obviously is from an opportunity perspective. They reckon that every new vehicle that's going to be built in China in the next 3 to 5 years will be an electric vehicle. That's it. That's where they're going. There won't be any of the other type. And they're doing it because they have to do it. They have to do it from an economic development perspective, from a societal development perspective. We know, I think London alone, 15,000 people die a year from smog. So imagine what it is in some of the bigger cities in China. So they're doing this from perspective of we want to invest and do the right thing from an economic perspective, but also from a societal perspective as well. Our network, key goals, obviously the Secretariat, which I head up, outputs and deliverables. I'll talk about this in a moment, our assessment tool, but this has given us great data that others don't have to work with our partners to advise them on how best and where they should go. And then obviously at a regional level, we have an FC for us Europe, based out of Dublin. We have an FC for us Asia out of Shanghai. We are building FC for us Africa. And in the Americas, we're now looking at Latin America and North America, and we'll see what may happen there over the coming months. If I may just, on this, one of the things we do, and we helped, I suppose Barcelona was a case in point of this, is we go into centres and we say, well, where are you right now? So I know Paris is quite far along, I know London is, but where was Barcelona last September? And I think Tony Befair, Ankel and others say, well, where are we actually? Can we have a bit of help? And so we were able to assess the position of Barcelona, work with the guys then, once they knew that, to set priorities themselves with the President Luis, build capacity up within the centre, and then actually not just build capacity, we go, hang on, we have got experts here in the sector, but maybe we're not talking to them and we need to connect them. And I know, Tony, you're based here in your institution, but there are others. Catalyse action, and that's what's actually the result of what we've done the last few months is tomorrow, that Barcelona is now going to launch its own initiative in this space and then share best practice. So Barcelona and Ankel has come to a lot of different sessions and said to me, can we have a coffee? How did you do this in Dublin? And he wasn't asking me how did it go right, it was where did it go wrong? And it was very interesting, and then asking other partners, what did you do right? And so suddenly within that network, he was able to get access to a lot of knowledge and then obviously review and refine. The right-hand side, the level 0 to level 5, is how I measure. So level 5 is achieving complete alignment with the Paris Agreement and the UN SDGs. Nobody's there at this point. Level 0 is ground zero, and so there's obviously centres that are there. Level 1 is awareness, 2 is evolving, 3 is getting strategic, and 4 is going mainstream. So most centres, including Barcelona, are in between evolving and getting strategic. And that's where most people are right now. So my goal and the goal of the FC4S is to assist with resources we have and to accelerate that transition from level 3 or level 2 up to the next level. I'll skip on that. Shifting gears is a report we did here. This is how the world's leading financial centres are entering a new phase of strategic action on green and sustainable finance. Some of the key findings, again, I'll just keep going through this. So here you are, 10 key insights on how financial centres are mobilising expertise and capital to help solve some of the world's toughest challenges. So what a lot of the centres doing via the climate finance agenda or the ESG agenda is 75% of our members are public-private partnerships. So it's government and the private sector working hand in hand and say, hey, we have a challenge here. And if I just maybe look at Ireland for a moment, we commissioned Deloitte last year to do a piece of work to say, how much does Ireland actually need to decarbonise between now and 2030? And the answer was just over 50 billion euros. So the state is then allocating 22 billion under a national development plan. It went to the green bond market last year, took 3 billion, but the state doesn't have the first full 50 billion. So it needs to create an ecosystem that the private sector can crowd in the capital. So what you're seeing in this agenda is a new form of public-private partnership. It's overcoming barriers to growth. It's going beyond climate. And so this is one of the things I said earlier on, what is sustainable finance? It is obviously environmental, but it's also social and governance. So it's broader. Policy innovation is a key driver, and that's again what the Commission are doing. Going back to what I said about the mobile phone, a strong policy environment, one that actually encourages innovation in this space. You will see a lot happen, and that's where the Commission is right now. A diversity of financial instruments, so it's not just banking or insurance, it's actually that entire ecosystem I went on earlier on. So insurance, banking, private sector, and academia. Because if you go back to the slide I had, the 10 different hubs, academia is critical in this in terms of research and learning. Sector evolution varies, so again, different centres are in different areas. Professional services are growing rapidly. So PwC helped me manage this. 4 or 5 years ago, you would have gone into one of these big firms and said, who's your sustainability person? And they would have gone, oh, don't really know. Maybe him or her because they've got a genuine interest in it and they have plants on their desk. I don't know. Now you go into these firms and they basically have 30, 40, 50 people working in a space. I think EY is 800 people globally. And that's so, and in Dublin and Paris and other centres you walk in, these people are crawling with the experts in the space because they're seeing what their clients are now saying to them. Those big corporates that Tony mentioned later on, and then the small and medium corporates are trying to figure this out, and so they're now reacting to that as well. Priorities for future action, focus on innovation, I said that later on. So how do you merge, say, fintech and artificial intelligence with the whole sustainability, climate, finance agenda, which is going to be a big thing to watch. And then, as I said, international collaboration is increasing, hence the reason why I'm here and ranting at you all today. So if you then look at institutional foundations, initiatives of green and sustainable finance are quite diverse. So I said public authorities, banks, insurance companies, there's a lot going on within those. I'm sorry, there's the interesting one. Municipal public authority are only 8%, whereas independent public agency with links to municipal provisional national government 8%, and then public-private are at 61%. So that's the way people are going. Challenges, lack of green product supply, and Tony, I'll be maybe taking over later on asking you questions, but if you were to walk in off the high street now into your bank and say, well, I want to do a green mortgage, someone's going to look at you and go, we don't have a green mortgage. Or I want to finance energy efficiency. Well, I don't know how to do that, but we'll try and figure it out. So part of the challenge at a retail level is lack of products for you as a citizen to go in and say, well, I'd actually like to avail of that. At the commercial side, we're seeing more and more products develop, which is quite interesting, but at retail there is a challenge. Inconsistent standards. So again, this is why the whole taxonomy is ongoing. It's an alphabetical soup of different standards, different acronyms, and what is what. So again, there's a challenge there. Lack of market demand. So again, I've actually been quite bullish if somebody used to walk in off the street and say, give me a green mortgage. That actually isn't happening either. So there is a lack of consumers coming in saying, I'd like to do something. Low awareness, lack of capacity, so understanding what does this actually mean. Engagement of public, mispricing of externalities, and then data quality and availability. I think the engagement of public is a really interesting one. We've seen in the last few weeks the children go out in the streets and really cause a racket, but it was quite phenomenal to see. But why did they do it? Because they felt we as adults weren't doing enough to take this agenda on, so that's where the frustration came from. But also, if you look at Ireland again as an example, we are now viewed as quite a progressive country from where we were a number of decades ago. A lot of things have changed in the last few years, but a lot of these changes in terms of equal rights marriage and other things that have happened came about through a public assembly, which had 100 people on it, which was considered to be a representation of Ireland. And a number of things that they've actually worked on have now gone into law. So there are ways and means of doing this and engaging the citizens. Strategic priorities, again, what are driving centres? If I may, capacity building is a big one, and that's from perspective of, we're not asking financial service sectors to throw out the skill set that they have. It's actually to recognise that the skill set is the right one now, and you need to layer on awareness of this agenda. I'll go through that. Enabling environment. Majority policy and regulatory measures in place are aimed at improving information flows. So a lot of what's happening at the moment through the Commission, but also what Mayor Bloomberg is doing is saying to corporates, you need to disclose what you're doing. So again, I'm using Dublin because I lived there as an example. During the crash in Ireland, we stopped building. And so in our international financial services space, which is in Dublin Docklands, if any of you've ever been there, you may or may not have gone through it, but now there's cranes everywhere. And all the buildings are being built for big, large commercial entities that are primarily moving out of the UK or wherever they may be going, but or where they may be coming from. But what's quite interesting, there's 3 billion euros being spent on all those new buildings. All those buildings are being built to the highest standards of energy efficiency, because the people that are coming in to rent them, the JP Morgans of the world and others, are saying, we demand that these buildings are the most sustainable buildings we can get, because we believe in this, but we also have to report back to our investors each year. We need to disclose what our carbon footprint is of our office space globally. So there's a whole push and pull going on, and Tony, I'm unsure if that's what you guys are doing as well. Enabling environment, I'll push through that. Market environment is an important one. There's a wide range of instruments present in our member centres. So in terms of green finance related index or a fund in a stock exchange, corporate loans, we're seeing a great one recently was ING. and Philips. So we all know Philips. I hope everybody knows Philips, a massive Dutch conglomerate. So they went out, and I'm not sure if you guys are part of the consortium, got a loan of €1 billion off 60 banks, and ING, the Dutch bank, led on it. And what they did was they went in, and experts, they measured the carbon footprint of Philips as an entity and said, right, this is the interest rate you have now. If you decrease that carbon footprint, we'll decrease your interest rate. If it goes up, we'll increase your interest rate, and this is all signed into the contracts. So that's innovation, that's where the world is going, and that's a push and pull as well. So in terms of our assessment tool, and just if I may take a moment to speak about this, what's really interesting about this, and it's the key thing that sometimes you forget, the UN has an amazing convening power. I'm just shy of wearing the blue beret when I go out to all my meetings, and it's amazing that people at a very senior level will sit down and you go, you are trusted. And so what we've been able to do with this assessment program is get the details and data of a lot of centres that compete and actually bring that data together, as I said, within our, if I may go back to this, we're able to use this data, maybe I've gone back too far, to look at this. So now we have data around all these different points. So you're almost like a mini McKinsey. And you're able to say, well, to your members, such as Barcelona, we now have assessed where you are. We have data that you may not give out to others, and we can see it in the context of a membership and say, this is what this centre did, this is what this centre did, and we've also got supports in place to enable you to move forward along from level 0 to level 5, wherever they may be within. So for me, data is king, hence the reason why this assessment tool is quite important. And actually, if I can, and be bold, Tony, I think one of the first successes of this assessment tool is Barcelona. It's why we're here, why I'm here, and why I'm here tomorrow, and it's fantastic in such a short space of time for the guys who follow this and then to lead to what we have tomorrow. So as I come to a close, and just bear with me for a moment, a lot of stuff we do is at Europe. I want to just mention this because, look, Barcelona is a European city as well. As Tony said, the policy momentum is growing. We have an FC for us Europe, it's based out of Dublin, and our goal is to engage Europe's 30 financial centres to really push forward in this space. So we work with the European Commission, that's all fantastic, and the Vice President of the European Commission has welcomed our report recently. So for me, the long-term vision is, at a personal level, I'm only doing this for a short while, that I have enough money in the bank to make sure that this can continue to run for 3 years and it is sustainable, and we build out a team to go out and help our partners such as in Barcelona to move on. At a global level, how can we mobilise the world's leading financial services centre to put more cash into this agenda? Not from a CSR, not from philanthropic, but from a return perspective through the lens of risk and reward. And for me, the real tracker is, we're now at X billions, how can we scale up to the trillions, is what I said earlier on. And obviously, that's my final point, is make a material contribution to scaling up flows of sustainable finance for a world economy in transition. So that's me done. Forgive me if I talk very fast. My interpreter told me earlier on today, you can hear her voice in your ear, that I speak fast, and that also in Spain there was 1/3 more words. So this is going to be even more difficult. So I want to thank Tony, I want to thank you as well, and obviously Gina and the Foundation, and I hope you found that useful. But for me, it really is a thrill to be here, and I congratulate Barcelona on your leadership, and I look forward to tomorrow's event, Tony.
Okay. Thank you very much. No tenim ara temps per fer preguntes. La intervenció del públic és important. Sí.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Don't take it as a criticism. I fully agree with all your statements. So I think it has been a pleasure for all of us hearing you. I have a picture in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Europe is like some sort of 3-floor sandwich, and Europe is in the middle of US, China, and Russia. I don't know, in terms of financial sustainability, if we can compare it with the position of Europe in terms of data protection. Protecting privacy in China, US, and probably Russia means nothing for them. Do you think Europe can be in such a position in terms of financial sustainability? You have been talking about decarbonizing. We have seen the US leaving the Paris Treaty. So I mean, should it be part of financial sustainability also to avoid fiscal paradises in Europe? Just a question. Do you think Europe has got that risk? Europe and UK, I'm still including UK there, but do you think we have that risk of not being powerful enough within the world in terms of gaining more people to this financial sustainability, which I think it's really key for the future.
Do you know, it's at these points that I realise that I work for the UN and that I'm not just an Irish person giving my opinions. So I suppose in answer to one of the questions you said about America, it was actually quite fascinating to see when President Trump announced the mobilization of cities within America, and some of these cities are as big as countries in terms of GDP, or even states such as California, and the innovation in America in this agenda is mind-blowing from a tech perspective, but also in capital markets. And Mayor Bloomberg's leadership of firms that are Wall Street firms, that are brands we all know, is to be complimented. So at one level, actually, it is quite interesting to see the dynamic in America and what's happening within the markets. And again, going back to the markets. So the markets are saying, okay, do you know what, to invest in A, B, and C over here, which is the past, no, it's not going to happen anymore. We're pivoting over here. And again, as Tony said, you know, that may be driven by their consumers, their investors, but it is also looking strategically at the future, where's the world going. So that's one. Two, I have no comments on data privacy or in that area. What I do have a comment on is, forget about the rest of the world outside Europe. Europe itself over the next decade needs to invest or find an additional €2 trillion to decarbonize Europe. So forget about the rest of the world, it's where are we going to find that? And I think we will find it. I think what the Commission is doing is a fantastic effort, and I think at the member state level, such as Ireland or the UK, those efforts that are going on here, and I know Spain is coming out with a new plan, as Tony said to me earlier on, which includes a whole just transition area to it as well. So within Europe, forget about the rest of the world, 2 trillion is required, and that needs to be from way that's investable. The opportunity for Europe, and again, it's an opportunity, and I haven't got a crystal ball, but the opportunity is in finding that 2 trillion, in mobilizing, in creating new products and services, which are investing in new technologies. If we are successful, it's in how do we export that to the rest of the world? And so that gets back to the market, and where's the best tech, or where's the best solutions. So I know I'm not answering your question, you're smiling at me, but that would be my perspective.
Gràcies. Parlo en català perquè tinc dificultats amb el seu idioma. M'agrada molt la seva conferència i la pregunta era quina importància li dona vostè al preu del carboni, de la tonelada de CO2, per poder activar tota aquesta economia. I si vostè considera que és important, quin seria el preu raonable en aquests moments o en els pròxims 10 anys del carboni? Gràcies.
I'm not a trader, so I couldn't make a call on the price, and then I need to be regulated by somebody. I think from the perspective of the carbon markets, because again, there's a whole debate going on in Ireland at the moment, and they're saying we need to increase it dramatically. And again, it goes back to policy certainty. So, you know, okay, if you have to increase it, by what, and by when, and by how? So you're, as a business, you can actually factor that in. And I think some of the bigger firms, I look at Michelin, for example, at the moment. Michelin factors in, and I can't remember the exact price, so forgive me, but it's a lot higher. It's multiples of what the current market price is. They factor into all their capital projects globally because they have the sense of, well, this is where the world is going, and the policymakers will eventually catch up. So I think at the large corporate levels, this has been factored into people's balance sheets at a higher price than what it is right now. I think politically, and again, I'm going to speak to Ireland, there's a whole discussion going on, where do we need to go with this? But I don't have a sense of what the price is. I know in Ireland it's I think it's over €50 is where they're eventually going to could be higher. So, but that's over X number of years. That's not, if something like that was to happen tomorrow, it wouldn't be policy certainty, so it's over a period of time.
Hi, thank you very much for your conference. I wanted to ask you, why do you think institutional investors, which it just seems so obvious what you just explained, what is sort of stopping them from getting into not only sustainability but impact investment? Is it fiduciary duty? Is it measuring? What is it not? So
I did a piece of work last year with the UNPRI on fiduciary duty in Ireland, and while the law was not saying that, you know, you're going against your fiduciary duty for not doing this, neither was it saying that actually it's a plus to do it. So a lot of these big firms are going, well, they're under stress points anyway, so it's not on the top of their list. I think the Nordics are just a fantastic example of people that actually are mobilizing capital or investing in the way that they do, and that long-termism approach that they actually have, which then invests, like, the healthcare system, childcare system. It's just phenomenal when you step back and look at it from a planning perspective. But I think, and Tony said this earlier on, I think it's over $26 trillion right now are invested under the principles of ESG. And then when you look at institutional investors, and the Black Rocks are reacting to these pension funds or the Amundes, they're getting more and more sophisticated around this. And I go back and, sometimes I joke about it, but you look at as I said, the New York Police Department cop who's been on the beat for 30 years, they retire. Where's my pension? And then somebody else comes in. So it's not a quarter or 1 year or 3 year cycle. It's a 60-year thing they're looking out. And so I think the institutional investors are now getting a lot more. They have a lot more data of the decades of research here. So they're now able to go to their asset managers and say, look, we would now like to have this type of profile because our members are on this risk, as Tony said earlier on. So a lot of it is actually happening. A lot of what's happening behind closed doors until recently, but now we're seeing them get more and more public. And one area that we had in Ireland last year was around the whole diversity agenda. I don't know if anybody's come across Fearless Girl. Has anybody come across Fearless Girl? This little statue around that big on Wall Street. So she was put out by a bank opposite the Bull one night, the approval of the mayor, only for a week. And it's a young girl looking like this at the Bull. And she's saying, and it's basically she's fearless in advance of this, and it makes this become a permanent thing now, and it's actually become a hazard because so many tourists want to get a selfie with this thing, and it's quite incredible. There's three of them. One is in Copenhagen permanently, one is in New York, and one goes around the world, and it's in London for a few months now. We were fortunate to have it when Tony was in Dublin last year, in Dublin for a few days, and grown adults just went crazy over this thing. It was fantastic. Trying to get selfies, and I think Tony got a selfie as well. But what was interesting about it was just the whole thing behind it was diversity, female empowerment. And I think, some may say a bit of a PR exercise, but it allowed the company that went with it to go to all the companies that got a stake in it, saying, why don't you have more females on the board? All research points to this will be a better run company with a balance. And now it's not just at the board level now, it's now going through the executives. So I'm seeing a lot more, and it goes back to that point. 3 years ago, there was ex-policy papers. Now there's 270 more. So it's just accelerating all the time, and where will be the next 3 years? So I think, in answer to your question, I'm seeing a lot more happening, which is great. There's a lot more data. There's a lot more products coming to people to measure. But we've still got a good way to go. And what the Commission is now doing is trying to put ESG at the heart of everything that they're pushing out of DG FISMA. And if that was to happen, that would really push the market on in a major way. Impact investing, though, if I may for one sec, sometimes I think people look at that almost like philanthropy. And I've made a few books, so I'll put it into a fund and we call it impact investing. It's so much more than that. And the firms like you're now seeing Goldman Sachs and others are setting up funds, but in the billions. And so the return isn't as high, but I want to have an impact as an individual. So that's something that we know in Ireland. There's a lot of funds domiciled in the impact space, and again, it's getting bigger and bigger. And so it's not so much I want a return, but it doesn't have to be as high as the normal. But I do want my money back, but I want to make sure I'm having an impact as well.
And you think there's a risk of greenwashing a little bit now, because you see many companies now sort of saying, oh well, I'm doing ESG here or ESG there, but some of the measurements that they use are not really that relevant.
Yeah. So
the criteria that you can do for your ESG measurement, etc.
Yeah. So we did a survey last year, and it was the first state of play in ESG in Ireland, and we were delighted X number of asset managers responded to it, and 81% of them had an ESG policy in place, and I was delighted with that. But the question back to me was, well, how deep are those policies? And actually, having gone through them all, they're all quite deep, but they've taken time to get there. They've invested a lot of money to make sure they've got robust policies in place, because at the end of the day, the investors that are going out to, the institutional people, are the Nordics, are those companies that can see this through this very, very quickly. So I know from an Irish context, a lot of investments gone in there, but as you rightly point out, this is a hot area, right? There's going to be people going, hey, guess what? I'm going to save the world with this, invest in it. And some people are going to go, oh, okay, I can do that. And we've seen that in other sectors. There was tech. I remember when I had technology for development, technology was going to save Africa. It was going to save the poor countries. Let's give everybody a computer. Okay? And that was never the case. And technology is an enabler of development. So again, capital markets are an enabler of commerce. And I think what will happen is, as you said, there are things happening. These things do happen. But the market will then push those things aside.
I would add in that point that greenwashing, which is obviously this a threat that we may have. Last week in a conference, we had the opportunity to share also with other banks and regulators, and in general in the financial market we haven't had this topic, although there is a risk there. But I would say that in general the market has been quite disciplined, and we have defined standards even before the regulation, and now comes the regulation using those standards to regulate as a baseline. No, there's an example of the green bond principles, the social bond principles, which is a standard that was created by the industry, that has been quite clear, which is other procedures you have to follow for issue a green bond or social bond, and it has worked. And now the European Commission is taking these standards, no, as a baseline to develop a EU level in green bonds or social bonds. So, and now also we have the green loans principles, or the new ones that were announced 2 weeks ago, the sustainability linked loan principles, and a standard to manage what you said, no, that operation, that deal on ING, or also that the kind of deals that we have, where you can set the price of the loan to specific KPI, ESG performance or carbon performance or whatever. No, so I would say that the market has developed quite quick, quite robust standards, and that has helped to avoid this risk of greenwashing. Now I would say the challenge that we have is we need a massive scale of change, and we cannot get it if we only focus on big corporations providing green loans, very nice green loans certified by a third party. We need to mobilize SMEs on renewable energy, we need to mobilize households, we need to mobilize retail investors, and to do that, well, we need more actions, no? Thanks to the European Commission that is providing a very aggressive action plan, no?
Question? So let me ask you a couple of things that not really questions.
Okay, sorry.
Not really question, but maybe just to give you the opportunity to elaborate a little bit more on some topics. So one is the relationship. So you mentioned the role of Africa, and Europe, Africa, and China. I think that's a triangle that it's important, because China is the big player right now in Africa in terms of investment, right? So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. And the other question is, so if there are two words or two topics I'm getting from all these events, a series of conferences we've had, is, so one, it's the idea of the need of regulation. So it seems that everybody's talking about regulation. So there are regulation for, it seems that a solution from the point of view of the academics, and the need of regulation that actually the private companies are also asking for regulation and coordination, right? So how easy it is to coordinate all that regulation at the world level, or is it necessary? So is there any role? So what are the problems we have on this issue?
Well, I think if I start with the regulation point, and I think it just builds on what Tony just said, we dramatically need to accelerate the scaling of capital. And so, when I was in government, people used to give out to me about tendering processes. There's a reason why there's a tender process. It protects both sides, right? And it creates a level playing field. It's meant to create certainty and transparency. So in terms of regulation, what the Commission is trying to do now is say, hey, we need to accelerate this dramatically in terms of cash into the market. So as Tony said, we're going to work with the private sector, which is what's going on right now in Brussels, to create this policy framework that allows the private sector to react and create products and services which actually lead to the scaling of that. But again, going back to what Tony said, it can't just be large corporates. It has to be at the SME level as well, where you'll really see change. That's one about the regulation. The coordination, obviously the G7, G20 have all done a lot. There's a network, as Tony said, for green and financial system, which the Spanish Central Bank is on. We're an observer as part of that. There's our network. But the European Commission just announced they're creating a new intergovernmental network of ministers in this area. So we're going to be working with them on that as well. So again, that's going back to one of the questions earlier on, that's coordination at an international level. And a few weeks ago in Brussels at the event that both Tony and I attended, you had the Indian Minister for Finance, and you had the CEO of the Japanese government pension fund, which is the largest pension fund in the world, at 1.52 trillion, both in the room. So there's a lot of coordination going on there at that level in Europe. In terms of Africa, Europe and China, look, isn't it just amazing the innovation that comes out of Africa? It's just amazing. So my background is technology, and I'm walking around Europe or wherever it may be going, wow, I can walk somewhere and just tap this and I can pay and I'm amazed and this all came out of the West. It didn't. It came out of Africa. And what you see, Citibank across my office in Dublin, they have a research centre where they're taking stuff that's been created in Africa and redeveloping it for the use in Western markets. But the innovation came from Africa, and they're not developing, you know, I don't know what's called here, but your energy system in Ireland is ESB. They're not dropping tens of billions into a brand new energy network. They're doing microgrids. And the same in telecoms and, you know, paying over the telephone and all these different things that are happening. So the innovation that's coming out in terms of energy and water and other things in Africa is phenomenal. What they actually need now is capital to scale it up. So from my perspective of Europe and China, yes, China is a big player. Yes, Europe is a big player. From my perspective is how can actually Europe and China work together to build capacity of the policymakers and the regulators and everybody else in these marketplaces to make sure that African-led frameworks for policy and regulation that actually make it attractive for private capital to crowd in to support innovation and then meet the scale for the solutions. That's what I'd be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm having dinner with you later, so you
No,
can
no,
ask
no,
me then.
no. Imagine that we have, and you have in one table, the local government of a city like, let's say, Barcelona, and also financial institutions, investors, banks, and also, why not, business leaders from different industries, representatives from SMEs associations, and they work all together and they ask you, well, we want to mobilize more capital. Which would be the priorities do you think that they should focus? Which would be your recommendations for to make a relevant step, no, on this transition that has to be done at a larger scale, no? Do you have any using the experience from other centers of what has been working or not?
Yep.
What could be the, hey guys, focus on this, on that, and I will come next year, we'll see, no?
Yeah, I'll come back to Barcelona in
Yeah.
between, but because it's beautiful. But no, I get your point. And it was actually one of your colleagues, one of Gina's colleagues, asked me earlier on. She interviewed me. She made me feel like a superstar. It was fantastic. But I have no editing power over the video, so I don't know how I'm going to come across. But she did say to me, she goes, if you come into a city and you say, well, what should the city be doing from a climate environmental in terms of impact? And for me, it's either transport or water, right? And so I'm coming at your question slightly differently, because we know there isn't a shortage of capital. There's loads of capital out there. There's a shortage of projects that have been developed in a way that somebody says, well, actually, we've got a target out to 2030 to 2050. We want to. So, again, I'm going to move away from Barcelona. I'm going to go to Dublin because then I'm on safe ground per se. So, we know that over 50% of water leaks out of the pipes in Dublin, in the water pipes, each day. Okay, which is just ridiculous. We now know we're having to go outside Dublin to start piping it in, and a lot of that infrastructure, believe it or not, was built in the Victorian era. Okay, so if you actually know that we have a challenge around water, which the government does, we've got a prime minister who's in his late 30s saying, actually, I want to really take on this climate agenda. We've got private sector with solutions, there's loads of capital, but what's the plan? And I think that's the key thing, is that it's not so much the capital guys saying, I can give you that cash or coming up with a plan. It's the engineers, it's the technocrats saying, if we say we want to halve the loss of that water by 2030 and it's going to have this impact, or we want to have a very strong transport, they will go off and develop that plan through the lens of climate. And that's when they then actually sit down with they don't then sit down with the finance guys. The finance guys have been working them all along to make sure it's sense checking it. So it's more so, if I can, Tony, switch it from capital leading to being capital being the enabler of sustainable economic development. And for me, if I was sitting as a city in Dublin, I'm saying it's water or transport. I don't know what it is in Barcelona, but a lot of similar cities are similar. And then actually coming up with our target, how much is it going to cost? It has to be a mixture of public and private capital, and how is the private capital going to get a return? And that goes back to policy certainty. So I'm not trying to fudge that. I've just come from it at a different way.
Yes.
Hello. I would define myself as a serial re-entrepreneur, successful here in Barcelona. I come from Argentina. I've been doing this for a few years successfully, and I see a lot of opportunities to do a lot of business, concrete business in recycling spaces, recycling companies. We bought a company, a 183 years old company that recycles paper. We recycled the city which belonged there. We recycled the company. We've been bought from this bank a debt. We see that a very good opportunity, but there's like a distance between the policymakers, the big guys, the corporations they talk about, and the concrete opportunities in the market. How can maybe smaller players get in contact with the real opportunities? I see Europe as a land of they throw away everything, water, resources, spaces, and there's a lot of abundance. If you see all this abundance that can be recycled, rethink of it, there's good money to give to the people that want to invest. And doing that, you can make even more money. That makes more money. But there's there's the big issues, and there's the real people that want to get involved and have opportunities to do that. How can we match those two?
Yeah. I think, again, it goes back to Tony's point, is the real engine of change is going to be the SMEs. You know, that's the majority of companies in any country in Europe. So, Tony, maybe you might answer that?
No, I agree that that there is some misconnection between what is happening already. There's a reality today on the certain level of companies and corporations that they have also pressure from investors and from the clients, sometimes public authorities, public client, no? Asking for better performance on sustainability topics, and then go to a bank to provide, or to investors to provide funding in a different way. But at the SME level, that's true that it is not today yet. Let's say good solutions at the financial level. No, I would say that in general, SMEs consider sustainability as a cost, not as an opportunity, with the exception of those SMEs that are focused on circular economy or specific core green activities. No, well, there is I think that it was. In fact, the last time that it was in Dublin in November, I had the privilege to attend to the Climate Kick Summit, Innovation Summit, where Climate Kick is one of the most important partnerships in Europe, no, promoting innovation and connecting climate entrepreneurs with new ways of funding and investment, and so that this is a good example of how the European Commission is trying to promote different ways to accelerate this transition also at that level. No, so that's a good example, because there were a very good initiative, and they are also now starting to work also here in Spain, no, to promote different activities, climate hackathons, different activities to connect the ecosystem, no, also on the green space, no. So I think that's the role. In general, the banks, we are not that yet. I mean, there is only a few impact investment funds focused on this and participating banks, and we are focused on corporate clients. It's true that we have to move quick also on the SMEs level and engage more with our clients, no, with our customers. That's something that I think it's an opportunity for banks in general, not only in Spain, I would say in general in the world, because even the most advanced banks, they are not there yet. I think that's the reason why we think that it's good to be here to learn and see how we can develop better solutions. So good.
Hello, thank you very much for your very motivational talk. I work in the tourism industry as a sustainable tourism label implementation here in Barcelona for the City Hall of Barcelona and for Diputación. And I was wondering if in the financial sector that it's so sensitive, is there any label that certifies the management of any small or large corporation?
Well, yeah. The European Commission is, as Stephen said, is doing an impressive job on trying to mobilize sustainable finance, also to help the financial system to manage better the risk, but promoting also sustainable finance as an opportunity. And this action plan was launched 1 year ago by the European Commission under the leadership of Vice President Dombrovskis. He was absolutely a visionary on this, and there is 10 actions that are being implemented now and very quick. We have the roadmap clear for the next 2 years, and one of the first action measures is to define a taxonomy catalog to define what is sustainable, what is not sustainable. It will take practically 2 years to develop. By the way, China developed in only 4 months. But in Europe we will need 2 years at the end to develop this taxonomy. But yes, I would say the regulator, in this case, the European Commission, is trying to establish first taxonomy, then establish specific eco-labels and funds and standards. I would say that yes, it will arrive, not now, but the way where we could have certified activities. But in any case, if you are a big company, you can have a second opinion by any specialist analyst on ESG that can certify that you have activities on one field or another, no? So I think this is, if you are a big company, you already have. The problem is the medium company or the SMEs, they don't have, it's not so easy to have certified or branded activities, no? At the end, banks will have the request to report to the ECB, which is our exposure on green lending and on brown lending. So we'll have to know in our balance sheet which activities we are finding and that can be considered green or not. Because maybe in the medium term, ECB going to request specific different capital requirements for one type of assets in front of other type of assets, no? And that's the way probably that will change. So it will come a certain way to standardize which activity can be considered green or not.
Hi. So, sorry. So, to private investors, one thing that comes to my mind when it comes to investing in sustainable finances are crowd lending platforms that invest in green projects. Do you know how developed these things are and how well regulated are? Because the fintech environment is still lagging a bit in terms of regulation.
Yeah. Again, I can only speak to Dublin. I believe, it's all about regulation, brings certainty, yeah, and that with that regulation then allows you to grow. Why would you invest in a company that's going to manage hundreds of millions that isn't regulated? So there's a lot happening. It's quite interesting actually, just building on what Tony just said. If you go back to the commission where it all comes out, the DG FISMA, the person who's over sustainable finance, is now also over fintech, and I just find that really interesting that Europe is now saying, actually, how do we bring these two together? You hear things about artificial intelligence. When I hear AI, I'm thinking like nightmare stuff, right? But it is incredible that AI can be used now around ESG, measurement, validation, fintech, around crowding funding. You see tech firms now getting banking licenses. And it's just quite incredible. As Tony said, your fifth driver was the technology disruption. I think what a real kicker for me though is, and this is one of the things that I'm looking at and I've been looking at for a while, the crowding, the funds, those platforms are fantastic, but we're going to really need the banks themselves to get on top of this agenda, because it is about scale again. So we would have done the climate kick stuff around startups, and it was fantastic at the conference last year. But one of the things that was missing from the conference last year, with the exception of Tony and a few others, were actually the investors, the big bankers, because there was a lot of the the startups. And somebody said to me before, similar position of Tony of seniority, said, I went to one of these sessions and I spoke, and for 11 months afterwards I got these emails of people I met asking me could I give them cash, and they just thought that's the way of the world, you know. And he was like, I'm actually investing in companies directly, and so what you have is what I'm now looking at as entrepreneurship. So one of the things that I want to see FC Fresh, we're now working with the Commission on Sustainable Finance of FinTech, saying, you want to scale up all this money? You're going to need the big banks, the insurance firms to look internally and say, why do we keep going out to all these consultants and paying a lot of money to say, what innovation do you think we should do, when they're going to just listen to us, put it in a PowerPoint, which is going to have traffic light system, and say, this is what you should do as a green, red, and then you can cover your backside because, well, they told me to do it. So I think what we're now looking at is going and work with the big institutions and saying what ING did, which is fantastic, what BNP Paribas are doing, what Tony and the guys are doing. Where's that innovation come from internally, and can you create a structure to really nurture that, create it? And so somebody in the big institution isn't going, oh God, if I do this, I won't have a promotion over here because they're saying it's about product development. So for me, it's bringing together that fintech startup with the big institutions, and that's something that FC Fresh is really, really focused on, because while it's amazing, and I'm not dismissing this, I'm actually celebrating it, Crowd Platform A has got X 100 million away. That's fantastic. It's brilliant. I wish I was brave enough to try and do something like that. But we actually need trillions. And the only way we get to trillions is if we actually begin to. And not have the big guys buy them, but a partnership. Does that make sense? I get quite exercised about it. And hopefully I'll make money someday as well. Is that okay?
Yeah. So I think it's time to thank Tony for being here, thank the BBVA for the room for this event,
yep.
And especially thank Stephen Nolan
you.
for this great talk and answering all the questions and the good humor.
And thanks everybody for listening to me. And forgive me for not having Spanish. It's embarrassing. It's amazing to hear everybody speak in English so well, so I do apologize, and I won't have it next time I come back. I'm not going to make any promises, but thank you very much. And as I said here, it's amazing that Barcelona tomorrow is launching this Sustainable Finance Initiative, so best
Thank
luck
you
to
very
Barcelona.
much.
Thank you.